I beheld till the thrones were cast down, and the Ancient of Days did sit, whose garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head like the pure wool. His throne was like the fiery flame, and his wheels as burning fire. A fiery stream issued and came forth from before him. Thousands ministered unto him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The judgment was set, and the books were opened.
Isaiah 11. And there shall come forth a rod out of the stem of Jesse, and a branch shall grow out of his roots. And the Spirit of the Lord shall rest upon him, the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and might, the Spirit of knowledge and of the fear of the Lord, and shall make him of quick understanding in the fear of the Lord. And he shall not judge after the sight of his eyes, neither reprove after the hearing of his ears. But with righteousness shall he judge the poor, and reprove with equity for the meek of the earth. And he shall smite the earth with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips shall he slay the wicked. And righteousness shall be the girdle of his loins, and faithfulness the girdle of his reins. The wolf also shall dwell with the lamb, and the leopard shall lie down with the kid, and the calf, and the young lion, and the fatling together, and the little child shall lead them, and the cow and the bear shall feed. Their young ones shall lie down together, and the lion shall eat straw like the ox, and the sucking child shall play on the hole of the asp, and the weaned child shall put his hand on the cockatrice's den. They shall not hurt nor destroy in all my holy mountain, for the earth shall be full of the knowledge of the Lord, as the waters cover the sea.
All right, Shalom. First and foremost, I would like to give all praise and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shah, Bahashem, Kapadash. Double honors unto the apostles and the elders of GMS who rule well, teach well, being great examples towards younger brothers. And peace and blessings and salutations to the hopeful lake out there pushing his word in truth and in sincerity across the four winds. In the name of Yahweh Bashim Al Shah, pushing to get up out of here. Shalom to the hopeful lake, the believers, the listeners who may have came back to the obedience of the scriptures through faith in Yahweh Bashim Al Shah. All right, I want to get into the day. I had seen a pretty good documentary, dealing with the ancient Babylonian Empire on the Nimrod, and it drew a lot of similarities, okay, of Nimrod and his character into how these devils, these Edomites, rule the earth today. All right, as we know, the scriptures speak about America being, the daughter of Babylon. All right, and we tend to, draw back to, the Neo-Babylonian period, under Nebuchadnezzar, okay, in his dynasty. All right, well, we also have to, go back to the ancient Babylonian Empire under those Hamites, those Cushites, okay, during the time of Nimrod. All right, and ultimately, as we're going to go into the video, all right, and Nimrod was pretty much a symbol of pride and rebellion, okay, against Yahweh Bashim Al Shah in the earth. Okay, and it speaks a lot. It's a pretty, detailed, informative. All right, it got a few bones in it. We'll pick out, but we'll go into it. But I want to start off here. Lay the foundation with this precept. This is Ecclesiastes 1:9. It says, "The thing that have been is that which shall be, and that which is done is that which shall be done, and there is no new thing under the sun." All right. So what we're seeing, okay, is a new Tower of Babel. All right, the Esau is trying to erect. Okay, and he's doing it with his technology. It's a digital Tower of Babel. Okay, it's a bunch of confusion and all out rebellion against Yahweh Bashim Al Shah. Esau was operating in pure pride, and vain glory, to attempt, to one up the Most High, okay, with this digital, all right, technology that he wants to establish. Okay, so this is what we're witnessing real time from the devil. Okay, and this was done, this was attempted, times before. Okay, but Esau, all right, he thinks that he has the technology this time to pull it off. Okay, he goes to the devil, Noah, Yuval Hari, you whatever. All right, Noah, Yuval Hari, all them goddamn names. All right, but you go to that guy from the World Economic Forum. Okay, the wealth, as they say. He boasts that, look, what we're trying to do, no other empire has had the technology that we have. Okay, and that's that man trusting in his wickedness through technology to be able. He thinks that he's going to pull this off, man. Okay, so let's get into the video. I say fair use, fair use. All right, I'm not making any monetary gain or profit from this video. Educational purpose only. Okay, so you go here. Let's get it. And like I said, he go in. He gonna make some points. It's gonna be a good illustration. We know, the people of Ham, okay, are dark-skinned people, so they always use, whitewash imagery for everything. But the people, Ham, which would be so-called Africans today, okay, are the blackest goddamn people on the earth. We're dark. But no one's black. All right, but let's let it play. And we'll build from there.
He was the first mighty man on earth, but was his glory a blessing or a curse? Since ancient times, some names have echoed in eternity as symbols of power and mystery. Among these names, Nimrod stands out as an enigma wrapped in glory and rebellion. The Bible presents it in a few lines, but its influence spreads throughout the history of humanity. Son of Cush, grandson of Ham, Nimrod was the first to establish a post-flood empire. He not only built cities, but also dared to defy the sky itself. This itinerary dives deep into Nimrod's complete trajectory, revealing hidden connections, forgotten prophecies, and current reflections that still shake the spiritual and political structures of our time. The origin of Nimrod, the grandson of Ham, and the legacy of the curse. The waters of the flood had receded, and the earth, devastated by divine judgment, showed signs of rebirth.
We are literally both on the same path at the same time for the first time.
Because Jason didn't tell you about the program.
Yet beneath this new beginning, the seeds of old pride were still buried in human hearts. Noah, the righteous survivor of the cataclysm, had become the new patriarch of humanity, and from his three sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, future nations would be formed. But in Genesis chapter 9, verses 25 to 27, a curse was pronounced on Canaan, son of Ham, after a dark episode involving Noah's nakedness. That curse, although directed at Canaan, would echo throughout Ham's descendants, casting a shadow over the deeds of his descendants, especially over a name that centuries later would emerge with unparalleled strength: Nimrod. Ham was the father of Cush, and Cush, according to Genesis chapter 10, verse 8, fathered Nimrod. At this point in the biblical text, we are presented with a figure who breaks traditional molds. Unlike the pious descendants of Shem, or the more discreet sons of Japheth, Nimrod appears as someone mighty in the earth, the first to exercise dominion, to found cities, and to inspire fear. The text does not present this force as positive. The Hebrew term gibor can mean warrior or brave, but it also carries the sense of tyranny and arrogance, as in the brave men of the time before the flood, mentioned in Genesis chapter 6, verse 4. Ham's lineage is often associated with rebellion and idolatry. Mizraim, another son of Ham, gave rise to Egypt, a land known for its gods and its oppression of God's people. Canaan, of course, was the birthplace of nations that constantly fought against Israel. Nimrod stands out, therefore, as the prototype of this lineage, a man who uses his power to dominate rather than serve, to build human empires rather than obey the divine will. This line of thought reinforces the idea that Nimrod not only inherited, but expanded the spirit of rebellion associated with his ancestor. More than a warrior or builder, Nimrod represents the birth of human imperialism. He is not remembered for his piety, his righteousness, or his submission to God. On the contrary, its history is marked by self-exaltation and the desire to centralize power, whether through cities, through language, or through religion. Nimrod's genealogical context, therefore, already announces the type of leader he would become, a man who wanted to make his name great, even if to do so he had to defy heaven itself. It is significant that the Bible reserves so few words for his genealogy, but devotes attention to the impact of his leadership. Genesis chapter 10 verses 8 to 12 records the beginning of his kingdom in the land of Shinar, the founding of Babel and other cities marked by control, centralization, and human pride. It is no coincidence that Babel comes to be synonymous with confusion. Nimrod's empire begins with the attempt to unify humanity under his authority, but ends fragmented by divine action. This is where theology intertwines with history. Nimrod emerges as a kind of archaic antichrist, anticipating patterns that would be repeated over the centuries. The rise of men who defy God, establish kingdoms of human power, and pursue spiritual autonomy. He is the archetypal figure who wants to be like God, raising towers that touch the heavens rather than walking humbly with the Creator. When studying its origins, we realize that Nimrod is not an isolated case. He is the fruit of a lineage and a choice. His genealogy points to the weight of legacy, but also to the responsibility of breaking inherited cycles. While Shem's descendants sought to walk with God, Nimrod preferred to walk the path of excessive ambition. Nowadays, how many Nimrods still appear among us? How many heirs of pride use power to control, divide, and exalt themselves?
Yeah, so he made the point, the descendants of Shem, which ultimately, it trickles down to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Okay, as they eventually came into covenant with the Most High. All right, but then you have on the flip side with with Ham. Okay, and Ham was also always known for being very idolatrous, heavy into Satanism. Okay, heavy into child sacrifice. A lot of the madness that Esau got into came from the goddamn Hamites, man, especially these Canaanites. We're going to show, okay, as we go through these things. All right, but what Nimrod, what he established in the earth after the flood, okay, was their wicked empire, the spirit of wicked empire. Man, separated himself from a higher power and doing his own thing. Okay, through military might, through force. Okay, they had propaganda back then. You see, and this is Nimrod set a standard after the flood. Okay, of wickedness, man. All right, and Esau, would take the baton and run with it. Okay, because even when you go to let's get this real quick. The book of Second Ezra, And we'll go back to it, to the video. When we go to the book of Second Ezra of the Bible, it runs these things down. It gives an account. The Bible, okay, is the records from on high. Okay, that's why the Bible doesn't have to check out with history. People try to make it seem as if the Bible has to check out, with history. No, history has to check and be vindicated by the Bible. Okay, it's a complete opposite, man. So we go into these accounts. That's why we have to keep the Bible referencing very close, and then we know what to spit out as well. All right. So you go here. So this started at 10. It says, and it came to pass. All right. And I started at 9. It says, and again, in process of time, thou broughtest a flood upon those that dwelt in the world and destroyed them. And it came to pass in every of them that his death was in Adam, so was the flood to these. Nevertheless, one of them thou leftest, namely Noah, with his household, of whom came all righteous men. And that was through the lineage of Shem. Okay, and it will be sealed off through Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Okay, the children of the covenant, the fathers of the promise. Okay, and it says, and it happened that when they that dwelt upon the earth began to multiply during the time of Nimrod, and had gotten them many children, and were a great people, they began to be more ungodly than the first. Okay, so this wickedness, this lets you know, okay, that there was a wicked era. Nimrod, he was a leader of rebellion. Okay, and that whole Tower of Babel was in complete rebellion against a higher power. Okay, that spirit of I'm gonna do what I want to do and be exempt from judgment. All right, Nimrod, was a token of that. Okay, so going back, let's see, going back to the video. Yep, come, we'll get that too. So your brother posted it. All right, so let's go back to the video, and then we'll get some more.
Nimrod's origin is not only in the ancient pages of the Bible, but in modern structures of power, where even today we see the struggle between submission and rebellion, between the kingdom of God and the kingdoms of men. Nimrod's story begins with a genealogy, but ends with an empire. And perhaps it is precisely in this contrast between the roots and the fruits that lies the greatest warning for our generation. Where we come from matters, but what we do with that heritage is what defines who we really are before God. The first powerful of the earth, the meaning of Gibor. In Genesis chapter 10 verse 8, we read that Cush begat Nimrod. He began to be mighty in the earth. The Hebrew term used here for mighty is gibori, a word that at first glance could only indicate strength or bravery. However, when we delve into its semantic root and
he's speaking of the Hebrew word gabar, okay, as you have Elder Apostle Gabar, which goes into mighty and strength. You have the beloved brother Amawan Gabar. All right, that goes in. It's a word that means mighty and strength. Okay, now we're gonna go into the Strong's, because after he finished going into it, we're gonna go to Genesis 10 and go into that word in the Strong's to get the reference points that he's speaking of, because it does have another meaning as well. Okay, and in the context of Nimrod, you can apply this other definition. Okay,
its context, we realize that this power carries much deeper and possibly dark implications. Nimrod was not just physically strong or brave in battle, he was the first man to use power to dominate, expand borders, and shape cultures in their image.
If your bath has seen a lot of life, nobody gives it new life like Bath Fitter. Whatever shape your bath is in.
In other words, the first to transform force into imperial authority. Gibor appears at different times in the scriptures. In some cases, it is applied to valiant warriors who fought in the name of God, such as David's brave men mentioned in 2 Samuel chapter 23. But in other contexts, such as Genesis chapter 6 verse 4, the word describes the Nephilim, the brave men of antiquity, linked to the corruption of the human race before the flood. This sets a dangerous precedent. Being mighty in the Bible does not always mean being righteous. Sometimes it means being feared, destructive, and defiant of the limits imposed by God. In the case of Nimrod, the use of Gibbor is not neutral. He is described as someone he was a mighty hunter before the Lord, Genesis chapter 10, verse 9. This expression, far from being a compliment, carries a tone of irony and even censure. Jewish tradition interprets this hunting not as sport, but as the ability to conquer and subjugate other men, of leading.
So let's go to the scriptures. All right, we're going to touch on that because who else was known or was described as being a hunter? Okay, but let's go here to Genesis 10. Let's get some background on him. Okay, so when you go here to Genesis 10 and 6, all right, it said the sons of Ham, Cush, all right, where you get Nimrod, okay, Mizraim, where you get the Egyptians, Put, and then you have the Canaanites, Canaan, was the freakiest of them all, okay, and so you get Sodom and Gomorrah, okay, this comes from Cain, from Canaan, all right, which we'll touch back on that, but you go here, verse 8, and it says, and Cush begot Nimrod, and he began to be a mighty one in the earth. So let's get this word mighty. All right. Let's go here. So you get the word mighty in the Hebrew, all right, which is bar. Okay, which is strong, mighty, brave. All right, well then you go down here to the Strong's, all right, the Brown Driver Briggs Lexicon. Okay, it says, and this is from the Arabic, it says, one who magnifies himself, behaves proudly, a tyrant who is bold and audacious. Okay, and this is how we would describe it. All right, Nimrod, and we know who fits this bill today. One who magnifies himself, behaves proudly, a tyrant who is bold and audacious. Okay, now when you go through the precepts, who do these things describe? Okay, let's go here to Isaiah 14. Okay, Isaiah 14. All right. I started at 5. It said, the Lord Yahweh Bashmal Shah had broken the staff of the wicked and the scepter of the rulers. He who smote the people in wrath with a continual stroke. He that ruled the nations in anger is persecuted and none hindereth, man. And this speaking of Esau, Edom. Okay, so you see he has those same traits. Okay, they describe, Nimrod. Okay, proud, full of himself, tyrant. Okay, you go here, Jeremiah 49. Okay, and we'll get back into this as well. But what it all leads to the same thing, pride go before a fall. You know, Nimrod was prowling the earth before, you know, the fall of their tower, man, the fall of his enterprise. Okay, and now we see Esau at the peak, all right, of his pride. Okay, this is the book of Jeremiah 49:16. It says, "Thy terribleness have deceived thee, and the pride of thine heart." Okay, O thou that dwellest in the cliffs of the rocks, that holdest the height of the hill. All right, and this is speaking of the devil Esau, man. And his terribleness has deceived thee because what Esau has became mighty in the earth. You know, he's been mighty economically and militarily. Okay, but how has he ruled with that might? You know, as a tyrant, audacious. Okay, very full of himself, man. You see, and it says that thou shouldest make thy nest as high as the eagle. I will bring thee down from thence, saith the Lord Yahweh Bashim Al Shah. So this devil has built himself up in the earth. You know, he even has weaponry in space. You know, has dwellings in space. Okay, these devils, you know, have the Lord has allowed these devils to build themselves up high. Okay, just as he allowed Nimrod to get to a certain point before he was brought down. Okay, so we see the same, you know, parallel when you're dealing with Nimrod and Esau. And I'm gonna play this little part again. Then I'm gonna come right back into it. Okay, because when you go play this again real quick.
Linked to the corruption of the human race before the flood. This sets a dangerous precedent. Being mighty in the Bible does not always mean being righteous. Sometimes it means being feared, destructive, and defiant of the limits imposed by God. In the case of Nimrod, the use of Gibbor is not neutral. He is described as someone he was a mighty hunter before the Lord, Genesis chapter 10, verse 9. This expression, far from being a compliment, carries a tone of irony and even censure. Jewish tradition interprets this hunting not as sport, but as the ability to conquer and subjugate other men, of leading by imposition and manipulation. The Jerusalem
Now, who does that sound like? All right, because when you go here to Esau, as Nimrod was described as a mighty hunter. Okay, well, what was the characteristics of Esau? Okay, Genesis 25. All right, and you jump down. Okay, Genesis 25 and 27 says, "And the boys grew, and Esau was a cunning hunter, a man of the field, and Jacob was a plain man dwelling in tents." So he called Esau what? A cunning hunter. Okay, and not just a hunter of food. Okay, but a hunter of souls. Okay, he said Nimrod, you know, like a hunter of souls, because he had to, in order to pull this off, he had to get people to buy in to try to pull off the Tower of Babel. So he had to get the masses to buy into that play. Okay, just like Esau, he's getting the masses to buy into rebellion against Yahweh Shemal Shah. Okay, this man has created a whole system. So you go into the word cunning in Hebrew, it should die. All right, which goes in what to know, all right, to perceive. Okay, it says to discriminate, to distinguish. All right, and this man has a high intelligence when it comes to deception, man. All right, his science on wickedness and psychology, all right, is very high, man. Okay, this is, it says to know how to be skillful in. All right, to know how to be skillful in. So this man is extremely skillful when it comes to hunting. All right, the souls of men, and that's why even when you go to Revelation, all right, what was found in Babylon. Okay, Revelation Yeah, 15. And it goes into all the, the merchandise. I started at 12, Revelation 18 and 12, verse 13. It says the merchandise of gold and silver and precious stone and of pearls and of fine linen and purple and silk and scarlet and all fine wood and all manner of vessels of ivory and all manner of vessels of most precious wood and of brass and of iron and of marble and cinnamon and odors and ointments and frankincense and wine and oil and fine flour and wheat and beasts and sheep and horses and chariots and slaves and souls of men. Okay, and souls of men. Okay, and these things that they were found in Babylon. Okay, because Babylon has been a great enchantment. Okay, used by the elites. Okay, to to hunt. All right, the souls of men. Okay, to get people, enchanted. Okay, and to conform to this rebellion, man. To agree with this rebellion. Okay, the earth is an all-out rebellion against Yahweh Bashim Shah. Okay, under these enchantments. It's to the point that, people, are willing, to go, to the death to defend these enchantments of what they believe. Okay, people they don't see what they're doing as a rebellion to Yahweh by Shemal Shah. The average Christian, the average, little feminist chick, okay, the average, degenerate nigga, they don't even look at what they're doing as being rebellion to Yahweh by Shemal Shah. Okay, they just look at it as they doing them. Okay, well, anything outside of obeying Yahweh by Shemal Shah is a rebellion against it. Okay, that's why even what Yahweh Shah say. I think that's it. Matthew. Oh my bad. Yeah, 12 and 30. Yeah, Matthew 12 and 30. It said, "He that is not with me is against me, and he that gathereth not with me scattereth abroad." Okay, so either you're with Yahweh Shah or you're against him. Okay, ain't no in between. You see, and Esau, has created so many, gray areas. Okay, to where people think, that they're not a rebellion. They're doing them, but they're not a rebellion. But there's no in between. Okay, either you're serving, okay, you're humbly serving the Lord, or you're against Him. Okay, let me see. The word against. So you want to give us something. All right. So in the Greek, the word is. Let me see. Mm-hmm. No, it doesn't give us anything. Mm-hmm. Okay. And basically we know, to be against something, to be anti something, you know, and we know that the scriptures speak about. Let's go here. And this is under the rulership of Esau, Edom. Okay, First John 2, I believe 18. Matter of fact, you read into it, because let's read First John 2 and 15 said, "Love not the world, neither the things that are of the world." Speaking of this age, okay, and this is the age of Satan, under Esau, man. All right, it says, "If any man love the world, the love of the Father is not in him." Okay, because the Lord hates everything about this place, man. Okay, He doesn't give a damn. All right, about Christians doing a good deed on Christmas. He's against all that because He's against Christmas. Can't do wickedness and then try to throw in a good deed with the wickedness, and, to make it right. No, the Lord hates Christmas. It's a pagan holiday. All right, so doing a good deed on Christmas, you're still against the Lord. You're still doing things that he hates. Okay, he said, for all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life, all right, is not of the Father, but of this world. Okay, and Nimrod was a symbol, of pride, okay, of lust, which he always wanted, more power, more land, more territory. Okay, the spirit of never being satisfied. Okay, it says, and the world passeth away and the lust thereof, all right, different ages, but he that doeth the will of the Most High abideth forever. Okay, little children, it is the last time. All right, it is the last time. So now, as we're in this time, what do we see? And as you have heard about that anti-Messiah shall come, even now are there many anti-Messiahs whereby we know that it is the last time. So just as Nimrod, he jumped on the scene as this great leader of rebellion, Esau, from the Renaissance period to now, he's been on the scene as this great symbol of rebellion. Okay, and he's made the masses anti-Messiah. Just as Nimrod had the masses, okay, anti-Yahweh Shema Shai. You see? And eventually the Lord will always intervene. So there's going to be no difference now. And in the fact that Esau, he's been given more power, that's because the Lord is going to showcase more power on the right-hand side. So he gave Esau more power on the left-hand side, more reach and ability to do wickedness, man. Okay? So let's go back to the video that I shared.
Jerusalem Targum goes so far as to say that Nimrod was a hunter of souls, someone who gathered crowds not for justice, but for ambition and domineering charisma. This leadership capacity based on fear or personal idolatry is a characteristic that spans the centuries. Many empires were built on the figure of a Gibor, Alexander, Caesar, Napoleon, modern dictators. Nimrod is the prototype of them all, inaugurating a new form of government in human history, the centralization of power around one man, as opposed to the tribal and decentralized model of the previous world. The most intriguing thing is that the Bible says that Nimrod began to be this powerful. The expression indicates a beginning of something new, as if there were no leaders like that before him. He is the first to build cities, form armies, unite people through force, and also to place himself at the center of everything. His power did not come from God, like that of Moses or Joshua. It was a conquered power, sustained by fear and pride. He founded not just cities, but a style of leadership and influence that would span the ages.
The pineal gland has tiny little cilia, hair-like extensions all around it.
By calling Nimrod Gibor, the biblical text invites us to reflect on the types of power that honor God and those that challenge him. Strength in itself is not bad, but when it detaches itself from obedience to the Creator and becomes an instrument of vanity, it begins to build towers that reach for the heavens, towers that are destined for ruin. The powerful of the true Bible is the one who serves and not he who subdues. Modernity exalts leaders who speak loudly, impose their will and shape culture as they please. They are in many ways reflections of Nimrod. Technology, marketing, and the cult of image enhance this type of influence, giving these powerful global platforms. But the essence remains the same. Use force to dominate and not to redeem. The Gibor that the Bible condemns is the one who stands before the Lord, not as a servant but as a rival. Nimrod, therefore, represents a milestone. He was the first mighty on earth, and with him a spiritual lineage was born of leaders who challenge God. Therefore his figure transcends time and is present in many spheres, political, religious, economic. From him we learn that true power must be exercised in reverence, not in rebellion, and that every force that does not bow to the eternal is doomed to judgment and confusion, as we will see in the following chapters of its history. Founder of empires, Babel, Ereke, Akkad, and Calneh. When describing Nimrod's deeds, the author of Genesis dedicates a specific section to list the cities that formed the foundation of his empire. Genesis chapter 10 verse 10 states, "And the beginning of his kingdom was Babel, Erech, Akkad, and Calneh in the land of Shinar." These 4 cities were not just urban centers. They represent the pillars of a new type of civilization, centralized, structured, powerful. A clear break with the nomadic or decentralized life of Noah's descendants. In Nimrod, we see the birth of the concept of empire, a human gathering shaped not just by survival, but by an ambition for dominion over lands, peoples, and heavens. Babel, the most famous of the cities founded by Nimrod, would soon become the symbol of human arrogance. Located on the plain of Shinar in the current region of southern Mesopotamia, Babel was not just a city, it was the headquarters of a spiritual and political project of human unification without God. The tower that would be built there, as we will see later, sought to reach the sky as a demonstration of divine independence. Babel has become synonymous with confusion, but its origin is one of unity, forged by force, not faith. The second city, Erech, also known as Uruk, is one of the oldest in the world and figures prominently in archaeological discoveries. It was a center of worship for the goddess Inanna and a place where cuneiform writing was developed. There we see how Nimrod's empire not only concentrated military power, but also controlled the religion and culture. This marks a new paradigm, the use of worship and information as tools of control. Erech is not just a historic city, it is a key piece in the architecture of domination that Nimrod erected, mixing corrupted spirituality with political authority. Akkad, the third city, would later be capital of the Akkadian Empire under the reign of Sargon, around 2,300 years before Christ. Although Nimrod established the city before this period, his name remained associated with centralized power and military expansion. Akkad symbolizes the imperialized violence, the systematic conquest of the weak by the strong, and a model of nation that does not grow organically, but through the forced absorption of territories and peoples. Calneh, on the other hand, is more mysterious. Some scholars identify it as Nippur or another nearby Mesopotamian city. Whatever its exact location, it completes the picture of a king who not only founded cities, but weaved a network of power over a vast region. Together, these 4 cities form a symbolic square of dominance, economic, political, military, and religious, anticipating what would later become the model for Babylon, Egypt, Rome, and so many other powers of the ancient world.
And real quick, because you go into this, because you're talking about religious, military, all right, social, and finance. So when you go here, prophecy speak about their format, okay, or this beast system, as he said, Rome, will follow their format, okay. So you go here to the book of Revelations. All right, you have that format when you go to, all right, this is Revelation 16 and 13. It says, "And I saw 3 unclean spirits like frogs come out of the mouth of the dragon, and out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet." All right, those 3 unclean frogs, all right, go into these 3 city-states, okay? You have the Vatican, the religious sector, okay, because you go in the Vatican, Roman Catholicism, well, that's where you have Christianity and even Islam, is an offshoot of Roman idolatry, okay? And those are the 2 biggest religions in the world, all right? There's nothing but an enchantment, okay? Nothing but pagan culture. You see, pagan traditions. And then you have, all right, America, all right, which is the military branch of this beast system. Okay, that's where most of the money, okay, is poured into militarily is America. All right, America's task, with keeping, the world order, okay, of this beast empire. All right, and then you have the third unclean fraud, which is the money system of London, city of London. All right, will represent the finance of these elites. Okay, the home of the banking cartels. Okay, so the same way, that Babylon, had, their setup. Nimrod had his setup. All right, of centralized power. Concentrated in these three different sectors. Okay, we see the same thing today. Okay, so let's go back. Let's probably go back. Let's play again.
Associated with centralized power and military expansion. Arcade symbolizes the imperialized violence, the systematic conquest of the weak by the strong, and a model of nation that does not grow organically, but through the forced absorption of territories and peoples. Calneh, on the other hand, is more mysterious. Some scholars identify it as Nippur or another nearby Mesopotamian city. Whatever its exact location, it completes the picture of a king who not only founded cities, but weaved a network of power over a vast region. Together, these four cities form a symbolic square of dominance, economic, political, military, and religious, anticipating what would later become the model for Babylon, Egypt, Rome, and so many other powers of the ancient world. By founding these cities, Nimrod was, in effect, defying the order given by God after the flood. In Genesis chapter 9, verse 1, the Lord commands, "Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth." This order implied dispersion and decentralization. But Nimrod does the opposite. Gathers, centralizes, builds, and binds men to its domain. It is the first historical and spiritual movement of resistance to the divine plan, camouflaged as progress and security. This movement has profound echoes to this day. The attempt to create structures that replace faith in God with trust in man, government, or science is not new. Nimrod was the inaugural architect of such systems. The seduction of empire is constant: security, culture, stability.
What are these things that we're doing right now that are really stop? Just stop eating for a little while. Like, some people haven't gone an entire...
But the price of this is the surrender of spiritual freedom. What begins as civilization quickly turns into slavery. Nimrod's cities not only existed, they continue to exist as archetypes. Every time a society builds towers without consulting the sky, it returns to Babel. Every time knowledge is used to manipulate and not to liberate, it returns to Erekwe. Every time force imposes itself on truth, it returns to Akkad. Every time power is exercised without justice, it returns to Calneh. Nimrod built empires and left maps that continue to be followed. This beginning of the kingdom, then, is more than a geographical account. It is the denunciation of a spirit, the desire for absolute domination. The Bible does not condemn progress, but rather the use of progress for rebellion. Nimrod's empire was born under the appearance of order, but at its foundation was disobedience. And every empire built like this, sooner or later, bows before the justice of God. The Tower of Babel, organized rebellion against God. The account of the Tower of Babel, recorded in Genesis chapter 11, verses 1 to 9, is one of the most symbolic episodes of human rebellion. After the flood, men had received from God the order to spread across the earth and populate it. Genesis chapter 9, verse 1. However, under the indirect leadership of Nimrod, whose influence was in the founding of Babel, a counter-movement arose, a desire for total centralization, both geographical and spiritual. It was in this atmosphere of apparent unity that the greatest human attempt to directly challenge the Creator was created, the construction of a tower that would reach the heavens. And they said, Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower whose top may reach the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be scattered over the face of the whole earth. Genesis chapter 11, verse 4. This verse is a portrait of the human soul when contaminated by collective pride. There is no mention of God's name, His glory, or His will. There is only we and our name. The desire for fame, for control, and for perpetuating one's image is the essence of the Babylonian spirit, which begins here but continues until the apocalypse. The tower was more than a physical construction. It was an ideological symbol. It represented the attempt to establish a point of contact with the divine without the mediation of God. Like Mesopotamian ziggurats, pyramid-shaped structures that imitated sacred mounds, the Tower of Babel sought to make its way to the heavens, not for worship, but for spiritual self-reliance. Human beings wanted to take God's place, or at least become independent of Him. The architecture of rebellion always begins with building blocks of consensus. Humanity at that time spoke a single language and used the same vocabulary. This uniformity was used as an instrument of co-optation. The project was common, the language was common, and so was the objective, to keep everyone united under human leadership. What seemed like unity was actually forced uniformity, a system where there was no room for diversity of paths or divine sovereignty. God, however, watches from above, and His response is full of irony and judgment. And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the sons of men were building. Genesis chapter 11, verse 5. The human construction, which intended to reach the heavens, still required the Lord to come down to observe it. The greatness of men is always small compared to the divine majesty. Babel's design does not impress the Creator, it only saddens Him. The divine action is precise. Let us confuse their language there, so that they cannot understand one another's language. Genesis chapter 11, verse 7. God does not destroy the tower with fire or send plagues. He simply breaks communication, and that is enough to disperse the rebellion. The tower, a symbol of collective pride, collapses from within, collapse due to the inability to cooperate. When language is corrupted, civilization collapses. The confusion of languages was, at the same time, a judgment and a mercy. It prevented the advance of an empire that would become tyrannical. This episode teaches that not every union is sacred. There are human alliances that form around ideals, contrary to the kingdom of God. Government systems, religions, ideological movements that preach the centralization of humanity without submission to the Creator repeat Babel. And God continues to confound these attempts, interrupting plans that threaten His order and His glory. Every tower raised in defiance will one day be touched by His hand. In current times, we see digital, ideological, and even spiritual towers being built. Social networks promise a new universal language.
This is the aircraft carrier shelter you seized, previously owned by a small faction of about 800.
Nations seek agreements that eliminate faith as a moral pillar. Ideologies seek to unify human thought under a single narrative. In many ways, we are reviving Babel, only with satellites and algorithms. The spirit is the same. Let's make a name for ourselves. The fall of the tower reminds us that God will never be excluded from human affairs.
It said the new Tower of Babel is set with, technology and algorithm, and what's controlling the algorithms of the day, AI. Okay, what's unifying people today? What's getting people to believe in the same madness, man? It's social media. Okay, and what feeds you? What creates your algorithm as you watch? Social media is the AI, man. Okay, so the devil is doing the same thing. All right, that Nimrod was on. Except this time it is more digital. Okay, Now let's go here to some precepts, because at the end of the day, dealing with these Canaanites, I mean with these Hamites in general, they have a very satanic spirit on them. Okay, when you really go into it, they have a very satanic spirit on them. When you go to here, all right, but let's deal with this for Esau. I'm going to do that in another lesson. Is the book of Job, chapter 21. Okay, in verse in Job 21 and 13, it says, they spend their days in wealth, and in a moment go down to the grave. And this is speaking of the wicked, Esau, Edom. Therefore they say unto the Most High, depart from us. Okay? And this is what they have the world chanting. People's belief system, okay, their conduct. This is what they're saying to the Most High, depart from us. Okay, alphabet, feminism, whatever you're into outside of the truth of Yahweh Bashim outside, you're telling the Lord to depart from us. Okay, and Esau has begun that chant in the earth. Okay, and through doctrines, philosophy, enchantments, it says, for we desire not the knowledge of thy ways. What is the Almighty that we should serve him? And what profit should we have if we pray unto him? Okay, and just to show you that our people, all right, because this is the mind of an Edomite, all right, but our people have taken on their way. Because you go here, I believe, is that Malachi 3 and 16, it's Malachi, Michael. Okay. Yep, this is Malachi 3 and 14. It says, you have said it is vain to serve the Most High. These are Israelites. And what profit is it that we keep his ordinance, and that we have walked mournfully before the Lord of hosts? And now we call the proud happy, Esau, Edom. Yeah, they that work wickedness are set up. Yeah, they that tempt the Most High are even delivered. So our people, have a mindset of Esau now. Like, what's the purpose of serving the Most High? I can win without that. Like, what profit is for me to be, restricted and have, discipline and righteousness? Why should I have those things when I can, prosper and do it my way? Okay. And they're looking at Esau. Okay. He's been able to prosper, and he pushes, prospering without order. Okay. And our people have taken on their mindset. Okay, and that's why the Lord, when he intervenes and say, though hand join in hand, the wicked shall not go punished, man. All right, there's a lot of Jake that's going to be judged. They're going to get caught up in the judgment of Esau. Okay, so this is here, Job 21, and 17 says, even it's like, what did Job, man? Okay, yeah, Job 21 and 16 says, lo, their good is not in their hand. The counsel of the wicked is far from me. How often is the candle of the wicked put out? And how often cometh their destruction upon them? The Most High distributive sorrows in his anger. Okay, so how often is the candle of the wicked put out? How often does the destruction come upon him? The Most High is going to distribute sorrows in his anger, man. Okay, everyone is caught up in this, the pride and the wickedness of this age, this rebellion. All right, you're dancing. If you're dancing to the tune of this rebellion of the devil, all right, the Lord is finna distribute sorrows in his anger, man, misery, man. Okay, verse 18, it says, they are stubble before the wind, as the nukes and the chaff that the storm carried away, man, those chariots. Okay, so with that time, this rebellion is going to be addressed in the earth. The Lord is going to allow the devil, to build so far. All right, then he's going to intervene. Okay, and we at that time where the Lord is getting ready to intervene on this new Tower of Babel, all right, being constructed by Esau, Edom. Okay, so that was the point. I pray that you brothers, all right, and you sisters edified once again. I'm going to give all praise and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushua, Bahashem, Kakwadash, and double honors unto the apostles and the elders of GMS who rule well, teach well, being great examples towards other brothers. And peace and blessing salutations, hopefully. Shalom.